Anyway, welcome to everyone. It's good to have our monthly meetings and able to include so many of our members all over the country. And this is fun and just wonderful to see people and hear their voices and see faces and everything. Before I introduce the speaker, I want to say that at the end of the video today, there's a bit of another video. I say at the end of our program today, we'll have a video. And just in case you're not a rock and roller, you may want to adjust your volume either up or press it back down a little bit. But remember that for at the end of this program today. Very special. Well, I'm delighted to have our special speaker today. I first met him in 1993 when Trenton Boyd and my uncle and I went to England. Trenton and uncle had already been there many times, but it was my first trip and first time to go to a postcard fair and to be around and see all of this. It was wonderful fun. But there was Brian Lund. I knew Brian through his magazine, a monthly magazine called Picture Postcard Monthly. He and his wife had that for 35 years and gave their heart and soul and all of their expertise and energy to that wonderful magazine. And they're still, to this day, they sold the magazine. I believe it was in 2015, but they have the picture postcard annual once a year. It's a one time since it's called an annual, but it's a thick publication. And if you're thinking about going to England or wishing or hoping or planning, you'll do yourself a favor by emailing to Brian, getting any information, but buying his picture postcard annual for that year. And I say that because almost once things get rolling again after COVID, there's a postcard event almost, well, at least once a week, and sometimes it seems like almost every day, someplace in England. And they have this wonderful transportation system that can take you to villages and cities and towns and quickly. You know, you can go clear across the country in just a few hours. So it's a wonderful place to visit. I don't have to go into all of that, but do think about and remember Brian Lund's picture postcard annual. That'll give you a treat. It's a wonderful reference book for all of the fairs and events, articles, ads, and so forth. And they do a calendar month by month. You'll like it. I'm just delighted to have Brian Lund today. He's from Nottingham, England, and he's going to tell us something about Nottingham and some of their characters they've had over there through the centuries. So take it away, Brian.
Thanks, Hal. And good evening, everybody. I'd just like to reassure everybody that Mary, my co-conspirator on all these postcard things over the last 35, 40 years, is here tonight with us. I'm not by myself.
Evening all.
And I've got my special hat on tonight, my Robin Hood hat. I don't normally wear this, I've got to say, but I thought it was appropriate for this evening's presentation. I've already worked out with Alan Milbrand all the pictures that we're going to use. And as Hal mentioned, right at the end of the show, you're going to see a video which will be featuring some of the places that we show you during the presentation. And one other thing before I start, Hal mentioned the Picture Postcard Annual. Well, one of the big contributors to it last year, in fact, there were only two big contributors, that's me and this other gentleman called John Claydon, who is with us tonight. He comes from Gloucestershire in the southwest of England, and he contributed maybe 40–50% of the text for the annual. So I'm giving him a big call out right now. Anyway, Alan, if you'd like to kick off the pictures, we'll start the show. Right, there's the title, folks. It's Nottingham and Robin Hood, or as I sometimes call the place, Nottingham. Anyway, Robin Hood is probably the most famous person to come out of England in the last 1,000 years. And I'm hoping that most of you over there in the States will have heard of him. He was a famous outlaw who lived on the wrong side of the law, and he was a little bit of a menace around Nottingham. I just wanted to show you where we are. I've marked the only 3 important places in Britain that you need to know about. London, the capital of England in the south. Edinburgh, the capital of Scotland in the north. Oh, Cardiff as well, the capital of Wales. And then right there in the middle of the country, the place where I've lived for the last quite a few years, Nottingham. I think that we are the furthest from the sea of any place in England. You can see that the coast is a long way away in whichever direction you go. And so our trips to the seaside always take a long time. There we are, Nottingham, right in the middle of England and Britain. Thanks, Alan. And thanks for your cursor. Hal mentioned the chat room. I don't mind being heckled or insulted at any point via the chat room or being asked questions. And I know that Ray Hahn, if you have any questions, Ray will flag them up during the talk if he likes, because I don't mind answering them at any point. The talk features a whole host of postcards from Nottingham, and I'm conscious that I'm acting as a kind of tourist guide for the place. And I hope that when you next consider a trip to England, you will make sure that you call in and see Nottingham. This is the southern entrance to the city, which crosses the famous River Trent. And that's Trent Bridge. This is a postcard from about 1906, and it's in a really important local series called the Clumber series, which we will talk about more later. Underneath the middle arch of the bridge, you can see the stand of our famous football team, Nottingham Forest. And this charming picture shows a rowing boat out to hire. That was a really big deal on the Trent, and indeed pleasure steamers still are. On the right, you'll see a photograph that was taken a couple of years ago at the exact same spot. But instead of the rowing boat, I've substituted a swan because it kind of looked graceful at the time. And our next picture shows that photograph in more detail. Just fix your eyes for a moment on the building at the top right of the picture and think this is 2019. And when we show some older pictures of Trent Bridge, we'll feature another very famous building that was there 120 years ago. And again, in this picture, you can see the much increased stadium of the famous Nottingham Forest Football Club above the middle arch. I think swans look absolutely marvellous on postcards, and I think they would make a really, really interesting collection. And there's my offering. And the building top right now is flats. In 1904, it was a building like this, put up in the year before for a great industrial exhibition called the Midlands Exhibition, which featured a water chute on the left and this marvellous pavilion, which has been done in almost Oriental style to showcase industries of the Midlands particularly, but a wider Britain in general. Over the bridge, we've got a horse tram wandering across, and the bridge still looks similar today. It's been repainted many times, but the structure is there as it is. And remember, this is the southern entrance to our city of Nottingham, and this is a really, really popular place, popular area for people to go on holiday, bank holiday times and weekends. As I said, a very popular place to go. This is a postcard from the 1920s, showing children out at a bank holiday, playing near the river. Health and safety today would be all over this, I guess, and people would be saying you can't have so many kids in that area unsupervised. There must be lots of adults to make sure none of them drown and all this. But hey, 100 years ago, people kind of organized themselves a little bit better. This is a really nice photographic postcard. On the other side of the bridge, a steamer ready for setting off, taking folks on a trip down the river. And see again on the left-hand side, the lovely pavilion of the Midlands exhibition. I'm always amazed when I see collections of Nottinghamshire postcards as to how many of them were actually issued by lots and lots of different publishers. I suppose this is true of anywhere, probably every place in the States, as well as every place, every city in Britain. But there were lots and lots of different publishers competing for postcard sales, and people building up collections of these often like to include every single different postcard, even if they're only marginally different. Right, this is the postcard I featured in your newsletter because it's one of my favourite ones. The reasons for this are, number one, it shows three of the most famous things about Nottingham: Robin Hood, Nottingham Castle, and a pub, a drinking place called the Trip to Jerusalem, which is supposed to be the oldest pub in England. Having said that, there are probably 20 pubs in England that claim to be the oldest, but this is said to go back to the 12th century and got its name from medieval knights setting off for the Crusades in the Middle East and allegedly drinking here. I'll talk a bit more about the Trip to Jerusalem later. Robin Hood's connection with Nottingham stems from the fact that he is supposed to have had his headquarters in Sherwood Forest, about 20 miles to the north of the city. Now, of course, Robin Hood never really existed as a specific person, and the legend about him is really an amalgam of lots of different characters. But he's the one that's been popularized in literature and mythology, and he's the one whose name sticks in everybody's mind. Robin spent quite a lot of time at Nottingham Castle here, although it didn't look like this when Robin Hood was operating in the late 12th and early 13th century. He spent time here trying to rescue his friends who had been arrested by the sheriff of Nottingham, or even up to some dastardly deed, trying to upset said sheriff, who was an ally of the King of England at the time, King John, who's popularly thought of as bad, although in fact he was much better than his reputation suggests. Second reason I like this card is that Mary and I published it as reflections of a bygone age. We have a friend in a nearby village called Michael O'Brien, who over the years designed lots of postcards for us, including a set of 12, which all featured Robin Hood and aspects of Nottingham. I think we see another couple later on. So yeah, definitely one of my favourite postcards. We published it originally in the early 1990s, and it's still a very big seller locally. We're off into the city centre next. 100 years ago, this is the middle of Nottingham, and one of the big features of Nottingham in the first half of the 20th century was its trams. This is a street called Long Row. It's right next to the market square, and it was a hugely busy thoroughfare. It still is, but nowhere near as much as this, because traffic has been banned from it, and now the busyness comes from pedestrians. And we've got 8 old-fashioned trams on this postcard, which I love. A beautiful, real photographic postcard, and it's kind of 1920s congestion on a big scale, and you kind of wonder how they ever made their way out of it.
Okay. The question was, what century did Robin Hood take off in literature and mythology?
Okay, Jim asks, what century did Robin Hood take off in? Right, it was not until the 16th century that people began to write about Robin Hood as a mythical character, an outlaw who was supposed to be benevolent in that he robbed from the rich. He and his gang of merry men would attack stagecoaches or mail coaches carrying money through the forest and distribute the money that they stole to the poor. So he became a folk hero, and literature began to emerge in the 16th century in the form of poetry. And then books and stories began to emerge in the 19th century. And the legend has taken off since then. We have a shop or a museum in Nottingham called the Robin Hood Experience, where you can walk through corridors and rooms, reliving the Robin Hood dream and meeting all the characters. We took our granddaughter to see it, but she was so appalled and scared by the Sheriff of Nottingham that we had to leave quickly. We're staying in the Market Square. This is a better view of the whole Market Square. About 1906. It's all trams and pedestrians. The building at the end on the right is called the Exchange, which was like the town hall. The shops on the left still look very much the same. They've still got the same facades. On the right is a kind of ghostly figure in white. That's our famous Queen of England, Queen Victoria, who died in 1901 after being queen for 64 years. And lots of places put up statues to her, and Nottingham did. And they plonked her in the middle of the Market Square. The street off to the left we're going to feature next. This street goes up to our famous Theatre Royal, and this time Victoria is seen on the left. On the right, we have another photograph showing what it looks like today. All incredibly modern, with a really sleek tram, which when I see it in town, it always reminds me of being in European cities. Nottingham is bidding to be the greenest place in England, and the City Council are very keen on initiatives that reduce carbon emissions, and our electric trams are a big feature of that. And contrast the way they look with the trams from 120 years ago, and I think we have a better product now. Shows the day when Queen Victoria's statue. No, sorry, apologies. That's our big version of the sleek tram, so that you can all admire it. I hope you agree that it's pretty swish and modern. The shop behind the tram is called Debenhams, as you see. It's a large department store, and COVID has forced Debenhams as a group to shut up shop, sell off some of its branches and close others. And the one in Nottingham is closing, which is going to leave a massive hole in the city centre. I do like looking at this tram. This is the day when the statue of Queen Victoria that we've seen on 2 previous postcards was unveiled. A massive, massive crowd came into the square to see it happen. It was unveiled by a local posh lady called the Duchess of Portland. Now, Queen Victoria is no longer in the square. She was removed in 1953 because she was considered a nuisance to traffic, which was then increasing exponentially. And so she was shifted off to the north bank of the River Trent, near the Trent Bridge that we saw earlier on. And she now resides at the back of some gardens, and she's almost quite hidden from view, and hardly anybody takes any notice of her. But I guess that's what happens to people a century or so after they die. But what a marvelous occasion this must have been, where this amazing crowd all come to see the unveiling of the memorial. Now we see another card of the market square with a military parade and decorations for the coronation of George V, King George V in 1911. I know that our monarchy is probably pretty popular in the United States as well as here. In fact, sometimes I think it's possibly more popular in the United States than it is in England, than it is in Britain. But royal occasions throughout the years have been celebrated big time all over the country. Everything that happens: coronations, weddings, funerals, births, marriages. Something happens to one of the royals, two of the royals, and it's a big day in this country. The shop facades that you see in this postcard still, as I said earlier, still look pretty similar, although the names of the shops have obviously changed. Right, you remember the building at the bottom you saw in a previous postcard? Well, in 1929, that was knocked down, and we built this, the council built this amazing new palace to house themselves. This was the new council house. And I guess it was modeled on a famous building in Washington, DC, the Capitol. And I think there are only 3 places that are like this in structure in the world. One is in Havana, one is in Washington, and one is in Nottingham. And that still stands to this day, and it's visible from every single corner of the city and every approach into Nottingham. We can almost see it from where we live, 7 miles south east of the city. This was what the square looked like when the new council house was opened in 1929. It's a massive area, one of the biggest public squares in Britain. And over the years, it's seen all kinds of events. We saw the military march for King George V's coronation just a couple of minutes ago. Nowadays, it houses very often a fun fair, helter-skelters and the like. It is used for demonstrations, for business purposes, for Christmas markets, all kinds of things. There's always something exciting going on, even used sometimes for busking. Oh, and Mary reminds me that each summer we have a seaside set up in the square. With one year we had a pier, but mostly we get a lot of sand and deck chairs and stalls selling all kinds of appropriate stuff. And I did say that Nottingham was further from the sea than most other places in the UK. Well, for 3 weeks in the summer during the school holidays, we're able to go there without travelling very far. Just up the road from the square is a place called Willetton Street. In 1905, there was a big theatre called the Hippodrome, the one on the left. In 2021, it is now an Oriental food store. I don't know which you prefer. It's right outside now, a tram stop, which you can see in the right-hand picture. Things do move on. Before the place was a Hippodrome Theatre, it was a factory. After the Hippodrome Theatre, it became a cinema, and then it was turned into shop premises, and now it's an Oriental food store. Next to the Hippodrome is our Theatre Royal, the one on the left, which still exists. In 1905, another theatre called the Empire was right next to it, on the right here. And so within a space of 100 yards, we had 3 massive theatres. In between, there was a hotel, which knew what it was doing because it housed all the actors who came to play in the various theatres. On the right, you see a comparison picture which we took 2 years ago of the Theatre Royal as it is today, much whiter and sparklier. And that's what it looks like today. The sad thing is, of course, it's been closed down for the last year, and we still don't know when performances will start in either the Theatre Royal or what is now the Royal Concert Hall next door. Are we back now to the 1920s? Theatre Royal, Hippodrome, and the hotel in between, all showing there. Tram on the left, and right in the middle, you'll see a statue of a Member of Parliament called Sir Samuel Morley, who was a real big shot in Nottingham. Well, like Queen Victoria, the council decided that he was a nuisance and obstructing traffic, and therefore decided to move him. So they intended to move him to a park called the Arboretum, about a mile away. Now, in Britain, we have a saying that if something is a bit dodgy, it fell off the back of a lorry, as in dodgy goods emanating from a place that you're not really sure about. Well, Samuel Morley has the distinction that while he was being moved to the Arboretum, he literally fell off the back of a lorry and was smashed to pieces. And so all that is left of him in the Arboretum now is a bust of his head. Poor Samuel. Next, please, Alan.
Ryan, we have a question about the smokestacks in that last picture.
Okay, can we go back to that? Right. This was I mentioned that the Hippodrome was a factory. It was actually a complex of factories, and that smokestack is a relic of one of the old factories within the complex, which was demolished not long after this picture was taken in 1914. I'm conscious that I may give less time to future pictures because we're kind of running a little bit late on my schedule. We had 2 stations in Nottingham once upon a time. This is Victoria Station. Yes, Victoria again, the same one that we built a statue to. We also named a railway station after her. It was opened in 1900. Inconveniently, she died a year later. Victoria Station is no more. It's now a shopping centre. All that is left is the clock tower. This is our other station, the one that remains, Nottingham Midland Station. This is what it looks like in 1904. The bridge that you see crossing it over the top, once upon a time carried the line from Victoria Station towards the south. Now it carries trams, as I think we see in the next picture. There we go, there's the tram bridge. Otherwise, it looks pretty much the same. And we now have our diesel and electric trains instead of the steam ones. It shows the outside of the Midland Station, which again looks reasonably the same today. It was rebuilt in 1904. Just off to the left of the picture goes Station Street, where I was busking last night, opposite an antique shop, where we have a little stall full of postcards because they had a special late night. On to another station now, one out in the suburbs of Nottingham, which was part of an enterprise called the Nottingham Suburban Railway, which was built really on the outskirts of the city to ferry people from the suburbs to work in the city. But it only lasted for about 18 years because it was superseded by trams. This is Sherwood Station, and this is what it looked like in 1905. This is another postcard in the famous Clumber series that we started with, by the way. And the picture on the right, which we'll show an enlarged version of next, shows you what that scene looks like now. And I think you'll agree that that's quite a change. So Sherwood Station has been obliterated, and it's now a couple of big flat complexes. Now, at last, we come on to our hero, There he goes, Robin Hood. His statue stands outside Nottingham Castle, the walls of which you can see in the background. And this is one of the pictures that features on thousands of postcards over the years, because it's possibly the biggest landmark in the city. Jim was asking earlier about when the Robin Hood story was really cemented in literature. And in the 20th century, he was transferred to the stage. And there were lots and lots of productions called Robin Hood. This is a young lady called Carrie Moore playing him in a 1906 production. We have a tradition in this country of ladies playing male leads. It's now called pantomime, but certainly in Edwardian times, it was quite commonplace. When we see a postcard for a play entitled Robin Hood. And this is a classic scene where Robin heroically is standing up by himself against the wicked barons and lords of the country, and the Sheriff of Nottingham, who's heading that pack on the left. This is classic Robin Hood mythology. Right, here's our castle, which is integral to the Robin Hood story. And it is such a disappointment when you see it like this, because it's not really a castle at all. It's not a sort of castle that you think of English castles as being, or even Welsh castles. It's a country house. We will see shortly a picture of what the castle looked like. But the reason we don't have a castle anymore is because in our civil war, King Charles I, who was fighting Parliament, raised his standard in Nottingham. And later, Oliver Cromwell, who was leading the parliamentarians, decided it would be a good idea to dismantle the castle so it couldn't again be used by a wicked king. And it was replaced by a country mansion, which in turn was burnt down in 1831 by some local rioters who didn't agree with a reform bill that had been refused entry to Parliament. On the left is Nottingham's coat of arms, which includes two Robin Hood-like figures, of course. Now, some of you may be familiar with an artist called Tom Brown, a famous comic British postcard artist, because he did a couple of series of baseball comics, which he did after he'd travelled to the States. I don't know whether any of you have come across them, but he added these to his repertoire. You can see the castle as Tom Brown portrays it. Tom came from Nottingham, by the way. The castle is perched on a rock, an absolutely marvellous place to build it because it was near impregnable. Next, we have two postcards showing the castle from various viewpoints, standing squat and not very exciting on top of the rock. This is from an area called the Park, which is the wealthiest part of Nottingham, where all the merchants in lace and in other industries that we had here built big houses adjacent to the city centre, but segregated from it. On the right is our little miniature picture of what the castle looked like originally, which Alan will now show us the big version of. Right, this is what castles are supposed to look like. And this is what Nottingham Castle looked like in the 16th century. Over the last 2 years, our castle has been refurbished, and I was hoping they would rebuild it so it looked like this. But sadly, it still looks the same as it did 2 years ago. But how wonderful it would be to have a replica of this amazing building to encourage tourists to come along to Nottingham. The only bit of the castle that actually looks like a castle is this gateway, which again features on thousands of different postcards and big tourist attraction. And that's still there, still looks pretty similar. And Nottingham Castle is a popular place to visit, although 3 years ago they started charging people to go in, which made it slightly less popular. There's a picture of the castle perched on this marvelous sandstone rock. And as I was explaining with the Tom Brown design of it, it's pretty impregnable. Attacking forces would have found it very difficult to access our marvellous castle perched on top of there. There's the castle from another viewpoint down below. The castle is built on all these sandstone rocks, and it's possible nowadays to have tours through the caves into which are built houses and a pub, which we'll see later. We last went on a cave tour just before the castle closed for refurbishment 2 years ago. But it's that's a very popular thing to do in Nottingham. This is a very attractive view of the castle by an artist called Charles Flower, who designed many postcards in the 1905 to 1915 period, and even beyond, actually, because he did some for the British Empire exhibition in 24. And he shows it as quite an attractive building, but again, sadly, not like the castle that Robin Hood would have known. Some 5 years ago, the local Robin Hood Society decided to try and break the Guinness World Record for the most number of people dressed in as Robin Hood in one place. And so they encouraged people to put on their Robin Hood gear and come along to the castle one day. And there was a mass gathering of them, and it includes, on the picture on the bottom right, includes Mary, and perhaps if Alan's got his cursor, thank you, Alan, there she is, dressed as Robin Hood, taking part in the most Robin Hoods in the castle day. And if you notice the hat she's wearing, well, it's this one here that I've got on today, and she very kindly lent me it for this presentation. So there we go. This is a postcard that we published. Again, trying to big up Robin Hood. On the top picture, you can see the gateway in the top right-hand corner. And the great news is that they broke the world record for the most number of people dressed as Robin Hood and got into the Guinness Book of Records. This is a postcard when it appears. This is a postcard of our most famous pub, the Trip to Jerusalem, which I mentioned sometime earlier. It is actually built into the caves. So you go into this pub and you sit in the rooms and you're looking up at a cave ceiling. You are right in the caves underneath Nottingham Castle. It's an amazing place. It's got a worldwide reputation and it's got a very good local reputation. And it's just a marvelous pub, a marvelous place to have in our city. Nottingham itself has never been a hugely industrial city. We've had coal mines in the north of the county and roundabout, but the city itself has always been built on light industries, and one of these was lace making. One time we were the most famous lace making town in the world, I think. We have a lace market, which now houses or shows all the buildings, all the old lace manufacturers that existed in the 19th and early 20th century. On the left is a place called the Lace Hall. When Michael O'Brien designed this postcard, it was a museum to the lace industry. Before that, it had been a church, and now it is yet another pub. Because in the end, every building in England seems to turn into a pub or a cafe sooner or later. This is another card in the series that Michael O'Brien did for us of Robin Hood in a typical Nottingham location. Here's a postcard which says, "Greetings from the Lace City," and then a few views. A lovely patterned background. And Nottingham did for a while sell itself tourist-wise on lace retail sales. And nowadays, we've still got the lace market, which houses all the buildings, as I said, and it's a beautiful place to wander around. But as far as I know, we don't still make any lace here. This postcard shows part of the lace market and lady workers leaving premises at lunchtime. Still looks the same today. This street still exists, and it's really nice that the whole lace quarter has been retained so that it still has the same look as it did in the early 20th century. This next postcard, again by Michael O'Brien, shows the three things that Nottingham, the three industries that Nottingham has been most famous for, apart from lace. One of them is bicycles. We've had a famous firm called Raleigh here for a long, long time. Another one is tobacco with John Player. And the third is pharmaceuticals with a famous firm started by a man called Jesse Boot, who began the worldwide chain of Boots the Chemists. Boots is now owned, I believe, by a multinational conglomerate. I hope you like these postcards that Michael O'Brien designed for us, because we love them. Okay?
Brian, we have a question
Fire away.
about whether or not these cards are for sale.
Of course they are, Ray. Just send me a shipping, get Hal to send me a shipping order and I'll get them across to the States.
Thank you.
Thank you for the plug. Okay, I mentioned before a famous postcard series called the Clumber series, which was started by a music shop owner called Albert Hindley, whose shop was in Clumber Street, seen here on the left and indeed on the right. And Albert named his series after the street where his shop was. Clumber Street itself was named after a big park in the north of Nottinghamshire called Clumber Park. Albert Hindley's shop no longer exists. His postcards were very successful for a while, but that was a long time ago. And nowadays, the shop that Albert occupied is a retail outlet for Levi jeans, which you can see in red on the right-hand picture. Clumber Street is actually one of the busiest thoroughfares in the country, but on this day, I think it must have been a Sunday when this photograph was taken, because it's not really that crowded. Which features another card by Albert Hindley in the Clumber series of another local landmark that no longer exists, sadly, called the Walter Fountain, erected in memory of another member of Parliament. Listergate, where this is situated, is now a pedestrianised street, which is very nice. Next, please. I'm trying to run through the remaining postcards, so we finish by 3 o'clock your time in the States, 9 o'clock our time. So we then have time for the 4-minute video. Next one, please, Alan. We're in the Arboretum where Samuel Morley's statue ended up. This is our biggest park in the city. Still a very popular place to be. It got nationwide news a month ago when, after lockdown restrictions for COVID were eased, there was a massive party by students in the park, and all hell was let loose. And it made nationwide news. One of the famous things in the park is our aviary, housing lots of exotic birds. No, we don't. This is something else in the Arboretum, is our Chinese bell and Crimean war cannon, both of which were looted as a result of wars. The Chinese bell was captured on Broader Cross during the Opium Wars with China in late 1830s, and the cannon came from the Crimean War. They're both now housed in the Arboretum, but the Chinese bell is now a replica because the real thing was shipped off to a museum in Preston in the north of England. Next, please. Outside of the city, we have another wonderful park called Willetton Park, with its famous 16th century hall. And this is a really, really popular place for people to go at weekends. It includes a lake, lots and lots of parkland and deer. Once upon a time, Nottingham University was in the city centre, but then Jesse Boot, who I mentioned before as the founder of Boots Pharmaceutical Company, funded the building of a brand new university on the outskirts of the city, complete with its own lake and acres of land. And the acres and acres of land still exist, although they've been built on to an extent, but it's still a beautiful location. And the park in the foreground of the picture is always well worth a tour around. And it's accessible by one of the Nottingham trams. It's on one of the routes. The tram routes, by the way, take you to the Arboretum, the Lace Market, all the recognisable city tourist areas. This picture again is just outside of the city, and it's one of my favourite local postcards. The old postcard in the Columbus area shows a train and a tram. And the comparative picture from 2 years ago shows a couple of trams on the left-hand side of the railway. And there we go with our sleek new modern trams again. I think most people in Nottingham are proud of the trams, although there was a lot of opposition because of the cost to the system being built. But now it has been built and the destruction caused by its building stopped. I think most people are pretty proud of them. One of our famous annual attractions is called Goose Fare. It gets its name from the fact that in medieval times, people from all over the Midlands used to walk with geese to the fair in Nottingham to sell them. Nowadays, we don't have geese for sale. In fact, we haven't had geese for sale for a couple of 100 years. But nowadays, it is a massive fun fair. In the 20th century, at the start of the 20th century, it was held, as you can see, in the Market Square. There's the Exchange building, the council building at the back. Queen Victoria's statue here is recognisable in the foreground. And the Market Square was filled with all kinds of exotic rides and attractions. In 1929, it moved to an open space of land a mile north because it was just getting too big for the city centre. And we're back on Trent Bridge, and you remember I mentioned the Midlands exhibition, which was put up in 1903. Well, it lasted a year before it was destroyed by a spectacular blaze. And it was, the whole complex was razed to the ground. And in the foreground, you can see crowds of people on Trent Bridge watching what I guess they thought was a kind of entertainment. But this was a tragedy at the time, obviously. One of our national sports is a game called cricket. I guess that in the States, the nearest equivalent is baseball. But cricket in England has been hugely popular and exported to a lot of places all over the world, sadly not the USA very much. This is our famous ground called Trent Bridge, named after the structure spanning the river. Trent Bridge is one of the most famous cricket grounds in the whole world and one of the nicest to sit at. But sadly, at the moment, we can't go and watch any cricket there because of COVID restrictions. And when the rules are lifted, I guess they'll only be allowing a small number of people to attend. Now we have an aerial view showing near Trent Bridge three of our famous sports grounds: Trent Bridge in the foreground, which we've just seen, the cricket ground; Nottingham Forest football ground, which I mentioned earlier, and across the river, another football ground belonging to Notts County, who were the oldest football league club in the country until they were relegated 2 years ago, and now they're the oldest football league club not in the Football League. Our penultimate picture is a humorous goodbye to Nottingham in the form of a comic card. I like these comic cards that were overprinted for different places. I'm sure you can find this design overprinted that says, "I've come to Sheffield," or "I've come to London," or whatever. But they're quite a nice touch to have in a collection. And finally, show the place where Mary and I live, which is a little village called Keyworth. It's not so little now. The first card that we shall see shows it in 1905. That's the approach to Keyworth, and you can see it's incredibly rural. And then couple of years ago, I took this photograph showing the same view now. It's much more built up. And that beautiful church, which is nicknamed the Coffee Pot, that you can see on the left-hand picture in the middle of the photograph, is almost totally obscured by a fitness and leisure club. But that's progress for you. And hey-ho, folks, that's the end of my tour of Nottingham, with a big mention of Robin Hood. And I hope that if you ever get the chance to come to England again, that you'll make a beeline for Nottingham and find out what it's like. But in case you don't get that chance, we now have a musical video presentation, which is a kind of tour of the place. And you'll probably recognize quite a few of the spots that we've mentioned in this presentation. So if you concentrate on it, I might ask questions about it afterwards. No, I'm just joking.
Town, then I moved to a place where the streets surround, village location with horses and sheep and cows. But I didn't get a kick from the open air, and I longed to be back in the city where I could stroll around the marketplace and browse round a whole load of stalls, selling all kinds of stuffy continental food, till I'd had quite enough and sit with a coffee by the fountains in the square. So take me back to Nottingham, where Rock City's got the music glam. Take me back to Nottingham, where there's lots to do and you can ride the tram. Catch it at the theatre square, make my way down to Goose Fare. You can walk down London Road to the city ground, where the ghost of Fluffy will always be found, or sit in the sun watching cricket at Trent Bridge. Drink at the TBI till your money's all spent, then go for a walk along the River Trent. Listen to the bands at the August Carnival. So take me back to Nottingham town and put me there to walk around. Take me to the Broadway Cinema, Hockley and the Bodega Bar. Into a pub where the ceiling's medieval, lose your money at a place with no hope of retrieval, or just chill out at the Arboretum Park. See a mirror to the sky at the Nottingham Playhouse, look at works of art at a castle that's a house. And if you're still in the mood for something good, you might just bump into Robin Hood. Lots of good acts at the Nottingham Marina that used to belong to Tuttle and Dina, and now it's the lair of the Panthers on the ice. And I better remember to mention Notts County, or else the supporters will be putting a bounty on the head of the guy who forgot them in his song. So take me back to Nottingham, where Rock City's got music glam. Take me back to Nottingham, where there's lots to do and you can ride the tram. I'll get on at the theatre square, make my way down to Goose Fare. I'll get on at the theatre square, make my way down to Goose Fare.
Oh,
Oh, that was wonderful.
Brian, that was terrific. That's all, folks. Oh, that was splendid. Wonderful, wonderful, Brian. Thank you so much. Please tell us quickly,
That's a
not
pleasure.
quickly, but
Yeah.
tell us about your teaching before you got into postcarding.
Well, I was a history teacher, and I got into postcards via postcards of the First World War, which I used to use in lessons to help with my teaching on the 1914-18 war.
Very interesting.
And as well as history, I taught it as well. I also taught English and games, including cricket and rugby. And then after 12 years teaching, I decided that it would be exciting to do something else. So despite having two young daughters aged 6 and 3 at the time, I gave up a well-paid career to be I don't know what, a postcard entrepreneur. And Mary was crazy enough to let me do it. She should have talked me out of it, maybe.
You make a good team.
It's certainly been different.
That's
Yeah,
right.
we do.
A good team and
She's
such
the
a
brains.
fabulous magazine
I'm
for
the
all
tool.
of those 35 years. Thank you. Thanks to you.
Look, it was a great adventure.
Very good. Well, we thank you for
Sorry,
being
Howard,
with
lost
us, and we'll look for you next time. Usually you both are in the audience and clapping and cheering on the next speaker. So thank you very much for being a part of all of this today. This is a real memory maker, and good to see everyone. Appreciate Ray Hahn's help with the questions. That went a little smoother each time. I think gets better. There's Mary. Lovely to see her. Our next meeting will be on June 5 and 1:45 Central Time. Please join us and be watching for Phil McDaniel's next newsletter that will have all of the details on the next meeting. Thank you all, everyone, and happy spring. And oh, yes, happy National Postcard Week starting tomorrow all the way through this next week through the 8th. And do watch postcardhistory.net tomorrow for the special tribute to Wichita. Thank you all, and good night.
Thank you, Hal.
You
Good
bet.
night.
Fun.